Anthony, let's jump in. Today we are going to talk about creative destruction. We are going to talk about all the opportunities in AI, and I think this is a really exciting episode. So, listeners, I want you to go back. Imagine it's 1900. You're standing on an American street corner, and you just look at the world around you. There's horses, there's people on horses, there's people in horse-drawn carriages, there are saddle makers, there are blacksmiths, there are all kinds of people that work, and their whole careers, their livelihoods depend on horses moving people. They move people, freight, mail, the food they eat, the lumber they use for their houses. If we go back then, there were over $1 billion worth of horses in the U.S. and another $208 million worth of mules. And it was a lot of jobs. It was a lot of the economy. Well, all of a sudden, the automobile showed up. And people didn't necessarily like this, right? We think about the automobile and how would we live without it. But if you were living back then and the automobile showed up, all of a sudden, you have a horse and a carriage on the street and the cars were noisy and they spooked the horses, right? Or they were in the way and people were afraid, hey, it's going to take all of these different jobs for carriage makers or saddle makers, blacksmiths, etc. So how did people respond? They pushed back and said, oh my God, we have to stop this technology. England created something called a Red Flag Act that you could drive a car, but if you did, you had to have somebody running in front of you with a big red flag waving it on the street to be able to drive your car. Vermont passed something pretty similar to that. So people were scared. They were terrified that this was going to ruin their lives, ruin the economy. And to be fair, they weren't completely wrong. I mean, it did wipe out. There was some creative destruction. It did wipe out big parts of the world, right? There were fewer stables, all of these different things tied to this. Now, they didn't completely go away. If somebody's still today, if somebody wants to work, there are jobs in those areas, just far fewer of them. But let's talk about then what happened afterwards, okay? If you just really narrowly define the automobile industry, it's about a $360 billion industry now compared to $1 billion before, with 2.4 million jobs working in it. If you define it broadly, right, because think about all the other things it allows, drivers and all of that, it's over 1.2 trillion a year, and I would argue that's low because I would say our entire, what do we have, 25 or $35 trillion economy is almost, I think it's 35, but fact check me on that to be exact, is almost entirely tied to cars, right? So think about all the things, Anthony, that cars made possible, right? Like all the things today, whether it's, an Uber driver, a truck driver, even, different warehouses where people live, it impacts, right? Gas stations, tire companies, insurance industry, roadside hotels, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, there's a lot of, it touches almost everything we have in society, right?
Yeah, not just the jobs. I mean, tens of millions of jobs in all the service industries and all that, but it also, it really, the internal combustion engine in general, not just in automobiles, led to diesel power that is used now and still to this day on trains. When those first cars, automobiles came to be, the roads weren't ready for it, right? There were ruts in the road from the wagons and so forth. It resulted in another invention called paved roads, which subsequently led to the interstate highway system, where you're able to drive pretty much anywhere in the United States and in the world for that matter, very, very easily and comfortably. So it's not just, the jobs, it's everything else that came from it. Manufacturing, using the engines to power factories, and making, we would never would have had the ability to protect ourselves in Europe during World War II if we didn't have this type of technology. So, yeah, I mean, the positives far, far, far outweigh the negatives.
Yeah, and I don't think that means we forget about the people that are losing jobs. Look,
No.
I have a kid about ready to get out of college. I mean, the job market is frickin' tough right now, like really, really tough. And but it does create opportunity, right? And I think the story, though, is what you were saying is that it's this way better that every time throughout history this new technology comes along, there's always an outcry, right? You mentioned before the podcast, recently, like Bernie Sanders and AOC are teaming up trying to, shut down AI, shut down data centers because they're afraid it's going to take all the jobs, right? And I get it. It's scary. I'm not even saying they have bad intentions in it, but I don't think history tells us that's what's going to happen, right?
Yeah, you could go back to prehistoric times. So you imagine when fire was first started to be used to cook food and so forth. It enabled tribes to peel off and feel comfortable that in a group, if they were in a group of 300 and there were 100 that weren't happy there, they could peel off and create their own tribe. They had their own resources. They could hunt and survive on their own. And that created, an expanding society. I mean, you could be afraid. You can be afraid, or you can embrace change. That's the bottom line.
What you said you had a whole list of things since 2000. You want to give people, just a couple of them?
Sure. You know, we take e-commerce for granted. There really wasn't e-commerce until in a way of scale, Amazon decided to put the bookstore out of business. But today, if you look at e-commerce, you've got Shopify, you've got Amazon, you've got Etsy, you've got an individual entrepreneurs selling everything from, solar powered generators to potholders, making a living. And the whole fulfillment of that, right? What does it take to fulfill it? It takes drivers, it takes fulfillment warehouses that create jobs, that provide real estate taxes to local communities. It's just the tentacles of that simple, what we take for granted today, the tentacles of that are tremendous. Now, the downside was a lot of bookstores went out of business. A lot of local hardware stores went out of business. Toy stores. There's a famous story about Warren Buffett buying into Toys R Us in the early 2000s and Jeff Bezos calling up and asking him, "Why'd you do that? I'm going to put them out of business." So, yeah, there's some downside. But again, it's like, going on a diet or going on an exercise program. It's hard at first and it takes discipline,
Yeah.
but eventually there's an upside. I mean, renewable energy. Everyone's certainly the two people you mentioned. Their favorite subject. Look at the industry that got created with the renewable energy business: solar panels, manufacturing, installation, transportation. Same thing with wind. It just creates tremendous opportunities, and in that case, clean energy, which someday, we'll be powering our lives with a lot more clean energy than the energy we're working with today. So, I mean,
Yeah, you mentioned, home delivery, and I just, even going to the grocery store now, right? I use an app, and we show up curbside. They put it in the trunk, and I drive home instead of having to go spend 30 minutes or an hour in the store. But I love supporting local small businesses and trying to go there to buy things, and yet I just buy almost everything on Amazon. Sometimes they drop it off same day at my door. It just makes life easier. And the other thing I'm thinking is the internet, and a little bit of this is my background, right? I came to Austin, 25 years ago or whatever, during the internet boom, and I remember I used to go down to the local Y and play basketball at noon, and there were about 5, 6 guys that worked for the Austin American-Statesman there. Everything from guys that worked in the back through, a feature writer. And one day we got done playing and we were, taking off our shoes and everything. And I just asked those guys, I said, aren't you guys scared the internet's, I mean, this is like early 2000s, right? Late 1990s, something like that. So aren't you worried the internet is going to like put you guys out of business or take jobs? And they laughed. It wasn't just the people that worked at the newspaper. Like people just laughed at me. They thought that was the funniest thing and there's no way that was ever going to happen. Right? Now, in that case, they weren't scared. They probably should have been scared or should have been looking. And yes, a lot of those newspaper jobs went away, but think about all the things that's allowed, right? I mean, all of the jobs that are in coding, programming, web development, all the social media sites, all the small journalists. Now, we can debate if that's good or bad, all the new journalism, but as far as opportunity, it's bad for my friends that lost jobs, but really good for the world as a whole. So, Anthony, let's go to the current panic. What are people panicking about today? What do you hear people panicking about?
Well, they're panicking. White collar jobs or entry level white collar jobs are going to disappear. They're going to go away forever. AI is going to take over. It's just going to run our lives. I mean, Elon talks about, no one having to work because everybody will be replaced by AI and robots. So it's fair to be concerned about it, but let's just imagine a Terminator type world where everything is a robot, everything is done by robots. You're still going to need someone to program them, fix them when they're broken, plug them in to charge them up. So there'll be a whole field of technicians and infrastructure around, robotics. Everyone, if you're building a data center today, you're hiring electricians who are running wires through conduits using screwdrivers and wire cutters and ladders and so forth and so on. Imagine with AI powered tools, AI powered schematics, where if someone makes an error, they get a notification that no, that doesn't go in that direction or it doesn't plug in over there. It could speed production. It could make it safer for people. And in some cases, with robotics, it can do the dangerous jobs that some people do today. So again, I keep coming back to people being concerned and fearful, and in some cases, rightfully so. But really, the message here is really designed to talk to the folks that are a bit on the younger side that haven't lived through sweeping technology changes. I mean, they're used. They look at their iPhone and their go to Spotify, and they don't remember that there used to be a telephone on the nightstand next to the bed, or that people got their video from a store. So as the internet and mobile technology really improved in time, there was a world before Netflix. Netflix used to mail DVDs to your house. Now we have streaming services, so many that, you lose track of what you're paying for. And the same thing with the iPhone. That iPhone you're looking at replaced 35 millimeter cameras. You go to a wedding these days, and
what are the opportunities? What are the opportunities that's created? I think people get yes, it's replaced, it's better, it's progress, but what opportunities do people have today because of AI, and what's coming?
Well, it depends. It depends on what industry, what interests you. One of the most obvious is it allows you to start a business, not necessarily with people. You can have an idea. I was listening to someone talk about this the other day, that the venture firms that invest in startups, angel investors, you come to an investment group and you say, hey, I've got this idea for a product or a service. And the angel investors, look at it and say, well, it's a pretty good idea. So how many people are you going to hire? And they're hearing one, two, maybe, but not right away, because I really don't need anybody right now. I need to work on my product first. And back in the old days, 60-70% of the invested dollars would be invested in human capital. Well, that is completely flipped. So this is going to open the door for people with creative ideas to access capital, and they're not going to need as much. So that means the investors are putting less at risk, and many of these are going to fail, as they always have. But once again, invest in 10, 2 or 3 hit, boom, you've got a new business. So I don't know what those businesses will be. There are people smarter than me that'll make that happen. But heck, look at OpenAI and Anthropic and Perplexity.
Well,
Anybody know about those 18 months ago? Those
yeah,
are
I think,
billion-dollar businesses.
and I think a lot of people get intimidated because they look at, they see the thing, and AI prompt engineers are starting at 250,000 or all these things, and they think that's not me. I'm not technical, right? Where I think the real brilliance of this is going to come is when normal people start to figure out how to apply it to their regular day life, right? It doesn't matter if they're a plumber, if they're a gardener, if they're doing something tech or healthcare related. I mean, we have a group that had a text exchange going on over the weekend, and an article came out about, we have the first billion-dollar founder, and it's literally the guy that started the company and one other employee. They have 2 humans, and I think they did 400 million last year. They're going to do 1.8 billion dollars this year, and it's just so much cheaper and easier for them to start that business. And I heard a great quote a while back too, that somebody was asking someone why there weren't more good Broadway plays. They're like, what's happened to all the good Broadway plays? And the person's answer was, we need more crappy Broadway plays. And I thought that was really insightful, right? And their point was, it's become so expensive and so hard to produce a play on Broadway that there just are very few bites at the apple, and very few things are tested and tried out. And they need it to be easier, lower barrier of entry, so that more people can do it. And yes, you'll have more crap, but you'll also have more excellence that'll come out of it. And I think that's what you're talking about, right? Like if it's easier and it takes less money, more people can try more different things.
Well, there was a time where almost all entertainment was, you had to be present for it. You had to go to the movie theater. You had to go to a theater to see a play, whether it was in your hometown or on Broadway. Pre-television, or even after the first broadcast television came into existence, there were only 3 or 4 channels, and it didn't go 24/7. People's capability to now consume entertainment in a myriad of ways, and almost instantly, and call up, if you're a reality TV person, you just search for reality TV shows and you'll get 5, 6, 10, 20 of them in various places, and you can sit down comfortably in your home and consume that. So, I predict that there'll be very few Broadway plays, or plays of any kind that you have to go to. That doesn't mean there won't be a play that you can consume electronically, right? So that's another change. So those actors still need to be actors. Those writers still need to be writers. So while AI is going to impact how you consume it, the what is still the same thing. So I'm fine with that. I'm sure, the theater, the theater owner is going to have a problem, but
Well,
that real estate can be used for something else.
I don't know. I'm not sure you're going to be completely right about that one. Like I'm thinking, yes, AI. Let's just say let's run with this example, right? We have AI movie makers and content makers, and I think there's a day coming where you'll be able to go on Netflix and it will know your personality, your likes, your storyline, and it will literally create an AI version of a movie specifically for Anthony or specifically for each individual person. And you may see a different movie than I see, or a completely different movie, right? But maybe it's as simple as we just have different stars or different actors in the place. And the fact that they're going to be able to create that um, is is this awesome opportunity. And I think two other things are going to happen. One, there are going to be some of the big studios are going to have a harder time competing. And instead of having a few big studios making all the movies, there will be small hobbyists that can make their own movie, and there might be thousands of people where there's now dozens or whatever. But the other thing that I think will happen is the need for human connection and people wanting to see live stuff will increase. And I think we're already seeing that. I think if you look at concerts, live sports, uh, comedy, a lot of these things that people go do with humans that are not AI, are not produced, and have more connection, all of those things seem to be growing and grabbing more and more attention as the market gets flooded with all this other stuff. And I think, using theater, I can't tell you the last time I went to a theater production, probably when I was on Broadway 15 years ago or something and went to something there. But I think there will be more. I actually think there's a decent chance there'll be more theater, not less.
I don't know. I don't. Theater in particular, I have a hard time thinking about that. Sports for sure, right? Real sports, live concerts, but even live concerts, have become incredibly expensive for the with the top talent, and they're beaming that stuff these days. So yeah, sure. When they in the 10 or 12 or 15 cities that Taylor Swift decides to go to, sure, I'm sure people will come out and be happy to see her. But there are 5,000 cities in the United States where she's not going to be. So people are going to consume her entertainment not in person. Doesn't mean that the in person won't be profitable. It won't make money for somebody, but it's going to make more money by beaming it to 300 million people versus a couple, several hundred thousand that are going to see the shows in person. So again, that's creating opportunity, right? What if I'm going to consume a concert at home, I want a really good audio system. I want to really hear it. I want to hear the guitar. I want to hear the bass line. I want to hear the vocal clearly. And technology may even come, and it probably is already here, that you can isolate. If you want to hear the guitar solo separate, the day is going to come where you could say, let's go back and listen to, Jerry Garcia, may he rest in peace. Listen to that riff, or whoever the current great musician is. So I think there's just so much that we haven't even thought of that's going to create such abundance for us in terms of ease of access, use, and to your point, really good point about tailoring the content just for me. Thank you very much. I mean, I'm happy. I'm happy to have it tailored for me. Right now, I think the Netflixes of the world or the Pelotons or these they're making an effort to do it. I think they're striking out terribly right now, but I'm sure down the road they'll get much better at telling me what's available and maybe even modifying the content to suit me. So I'm happy about that.
Let's take this thing because the same pattern shows up, right? And we can learn a lot from studying patterns. So throughout history, You know, to use another example, the ATM. When the ATM came along, there were people that thought, oh my God, this is going to be terrible. We're going to lose jobs. The bank tellers aren't going to have anything to do. But actually, because it cut costs, more banks opened up, and we actually had more bank tellers after ATMs than we had before, despite the computers taking over a bunch of that stuff. And people get scared, and then there turns out there's abundance, there was nothing to worry about, and the world is better because of it. So let's take that with AI. So we have AI, and right now there's a lot of fear, and hell, there's even a fair amount of pain right now with some of the disruption and people losing jobs. Well, okay, we talked about, we can see being a prompt engineer or doing something working with AI. Well, what does that do for robotics, right? I think that's obvious. This is also going to create all of these jobs in robotics, right? And it doesn't matter if it's, Figure, if it's Tesla, but the robots are coming, and that's only possible because of AI. Similar, really my car's a robot, right? I got a Tesla that drives itself. That's only really possible because of AI. 6 months ago, you didn't hear anybody talking about putting these solar arrays in space. Elon brought it up, and now I swear every tech person in every data center, there must be 20 projects now going on where they want to put data centers in space. Well, I think AI is really what's allowed that. And then, they're talking about putting a base on the moon and mining the moon. That's really interesting to me, right? Like right now, as we speak, I believe Artemis is going around the moon, which nobody seems to care about. It's strange to me that we haven't been to the moon in 50 some years. We're going around it and hardly anybody's talking about it. But, we put a base on the moon, the jobs that creates, and it's not just the jobs, but the moon has all of the elements we need here on Earth, not the gases, but everything else. And it's easier to mine. They can take it. They're talking about literally then just launching these because of the moon's low gravity. They're talking about being able to mine this stuff, whether it's gold or uranium or iron or aluminum or whatever we need. Take it, send it wherever you want it on Earth. And they actually claim they will be able to send, this is hard for me to believe, but they claim you're going to be able to send it right now because of the gravity. Shoot it off of the moon, send it where you want it on Earth will generally be cheaper than the shipping charges to do it here on Earth. Well, if we can all of a sudden mine the moon, mine asteroids, etc., and send it back, we have unlimited resources and unlimited materials, which then opens more doors, which makes, whether it's making the AI, the robots, the spaceships better, the solar arrays in space, and it's a never-ending loop, right? Like it makes it easier to create things, it makes it easier to get energy, and I can't even imagine what'll peel off of that in 5, 10, 50 years.
So let's bring it back to Earth. Let me give the listeners an example where we shot ourselves in the foot, but because of AI and the build out of data centers, probably within the next 10 years, the need for fossil fuels to run our electrical grid will probably go away. So during the 70s and 80s, we had a couple of examples where nuclear power plants had incidents. And as a result of those, they were bad incidents, by the way. In the case of Russia, Chernobyl, people died, people had a terrible outcome in terms of health and so forth. In the United States, that wasn't the same case. But the fear, much like the fear of Ocasio and Bernie about data centers, the fear shut down all production of new facilities and closed down several reactors. Well, because of AI, people that have been sitting on technology that miniaturized those nuclear reactors and made them much safer now suddenly said, oh, by the way, I've got these little, tools, this little nuclear reactor that you could put in the backyard of a data center, and it could power the entire data center and the community around it safely, cheaply, with no use of water or anything else that not going to pollute anything, and it's going to be good. Well, that's an example where we ran away from a technology instead of embracing the technology to make it better, to do what we really needed it to do. To me, it's one of the worst things that we did. I won't live to see this day, I don't think, but it's going to be a magnificent day where, China's got, I don't know what, I think you told me 100 of these things ready in the works, in terms of getting that stuff up and running. And that's a country that runs on coal, runs on hydroelectric. I mean, they displaced millions of people to build a hydroelectric dam, the Three Rivers Dam, I think it's called. All that's going to go away because we've got these little reactors that hold tremendous promise. Now, they're not operational yet. That could still fall apart. I understand, so don't hold me to it, but the promise is there for that. So anyway, that's just one example. And let me give you another example of AI fear and actual abundance being created from it. So let's talk about radiology. When you get an X-ray or you get an MRI or a CAT scan, they used to put the sheet up on the wall, or there'd be a computer screen and a doctor would look at it and look for tumors or broken bones or all kinds of things. Well, now AI is able to go in and much more accurately assess the scan. It still takes a doctor to interpret the scan, but obviously you don't need as many radiologists. Oh, wait a minute. What happened? Because the scans got so good and the cost of those scans dropped so much, actually more scans are being done. And as of today, there are more radiologists employed than there were prior to AI getting involved. So the whole fear of, oh my God, my $200,000 medical education is going to go out the window, turned out to be the opposite. Because they brought scans to the masses, you needed more people to do the analysis. And oh, by the way, more people getting scans, what does that mean? More people being diagnosed earlier with a problem, which allows for treatment earlier, which expands their life in a positive and abundant way. So, I could go on and on about examples. And I just want the listeners to leave this podcast today feeling like, okay, I get it. It's not, things are going to be okay.
So, I had an interesting experience over the weekend. It was my son's birthday, and he lives 1.5 hours, 2 hours away. And I told Julie to drive because I said I want to work on my bot. She's like, you're going to what? I said, I'm going to work on my bot. She's like, you're taking your laptop with? And you have Wi-Fi? I said, no, I'm doing it all on my phone. So while she's driving, or the car's driving, I'm sitting there and I'm communicating on Telegram, creating a shipping bot. And mind you, I don't know how to code. I don't have any of these skills. But I'm just talking to Telegram. Telegram's talking to my bot, which is talking to, I'm using like 3 different models, ChatGPT and other stuff. Again, I didn't have to really know how to do any of this. I just said, what's the next step? What's the next step? What do we do next? What do we do next? And really just talking to this bot, asking it what to do next and saying, yes, let's do this, or, let's do it this way instead. I basically created this app that is really pretty darn good, and did it while sitting in the passenger seat riding down the road. So I would encourage people just to really dig in. Some of what I think is going to change. Let's talk about how to think about this, right? Expertise is becoming cheap. And I think I would, ask yourself, where is expertise? Like, that used to be a moat to do a lot of different things. You're talking about the radiology, right? That used to be a skill that people needed. AI can now do that better than humans. So that's happening all throughout But what opportunities does that create? Coordination becomes simpler. You have a lot fewer people to put in there. Geographic barriers have been going away for a long time, right? Now, we happen to be in the same city, but even here, we're 40 miles apart or whatever we are. We're not next door. And just for me, the big thing is the time spent on busy work. So let me ask you this, Anthony. Just one of the things I always think about is what are the incentives, right? The Charlie Munger quote I love is show me the incentives or tell me the incentives and I'll tell you the outcome, something like that. So for education or work, are the incentives changing? Are they the same?
Certainly, well, I don't know if it's incentives, but information is now cheap. You know, you can figure something out and get your answer very inexpensively and very quickly. I'll give you a real world example. This weekend, I had to disassemble and reassemble a baby's crib. And I won't tell you the tool, but there's a particular tool that you need for it. And in the nooks and crannies of that, it's a pain in the butt. Spinning the thing around, it's close quarters. It's really one of the worst things you could do. Anyway, I had this idea. What if this particular tool were reimagined, if you will, in another way? And so I went on AI and I screwed around a little bit and it gave me a prototype of what I had in mind. And then I went out and I did the research and said, does this exist? Does this exist or anything else for this particular tight space, need that I have? It's not something you're going to need every day, but gee, it sure would have been convenient to have something. Well, sure enough, it doesn't exist. So I'm not going to go out and engineer a new tool, right? But I was more curious about, can I buy something? So because this darn crib I got to take apart 3 times a year. Is there something out there that would better suit me? And it doesn't. It actually doesn't. So what the point of all that is, if you have an idea, if you have a thought, you have a service you want to employ, you have a product you think might work. In the old days, yesterday, if you will, it's a lot of research. It's a lot. You're going to Home Depot, you're asking people, you're going to a mechanic's office, a motorcycle shop, and asking, do you have a tool that does this, or the research that it would take could take you a year to determine that it already exists. I'm telling you, sitting down yesterday with the baby crying in the other room, I was able to do all the research I needed to do to determine that the tool doesn't exist. It's amazing. So entrepreneurship,
unbelievable leverage.
Yeah, I mean, entrepreneurship is. I think we haven't seen what's going to happen. I mean, the humans you leave man alone long enough, they'll solve every darn problem that exists, as long as the government doesn't get involved. That's my only caveat.
Well, that leads me into the next big thing. I always think about what are the incentives. What are those incentives? What are the second, third, fourth level consequences of that? And the further down you get, the harder that gets to predict. But I also think about freedom and sovereignty, right? What impact does it have on freedom and sovereignty? And this one, look, it could go dark. Like the government could use this for surveillance and everything else. But that's not what I'm seeing. I'm seeing that it's creating more decentralization. It's creating people that are less dependent on an employer or somebody else. I just think it's much easier if somebody wants to be sovereign and do their own thing and be in charge, that because of the leverage you're talking about with AI and the project, again, the company that's going to do 1.8 billion this year with the founder and one other employee, there's opportunities to do that and cross borders. And I think it is going to ultimately give us more freedom and give us, more sovereignty and be harder to control.
Yeah, I mean, I believe that governments, United States, or other national governments will make efforts to intercede and cause difficulties and so forth. Most or some certainly won't. And I think it's literally akin to states that don't have an income tax and states that do have an income tax. Not that the same states won't get involved, but Colorado has a pretty restrictive AI law on the books right now that makes it really difficult to answer questions, certain questions. But the states that don't have that, or the countries that don't have those kind of restrictions, they're going to lead the way, and eventually the other guys are going to have to just drop their restrictions, if you will, and move on from that.
Yeah,
I'm worried, and I've said it in the past. I'm worried about state actors, not states, but state actors using AI for ill will, and they already are in a lot of ways with deep fakes and interference with other people's technology and so forth. But I think good will win out over evil, and power will win out over small players in that space. Anyway, but I have a lot of positive thoughts about what's coming. It's a tidal wave of good.
so your kids are too old for this, your grandkids are too young, but let's imagine your grandkids were a little older and they were getting ready to enter the workforce, or they were just getting out of college, somewhere in that range. What would what's the message you'd want them to take from this?
I think for me, after spending 40 years in corporate America and then at age 60 going out on my own and running my own business, I would tell them to be an individual thinker. Anything is possible, and surround yourself with like-minded people, positive thinking people who want to move forward. This is not about becoming a billionaire. It's becoming satisfied with the life that you're leading. And anything, it sounds trite, but anything is possible if you put your mind to it, you think about it, you examine your surroundings, what's going on around you, how do you leverage what's going on around you, and don't be afraid to try things, because you could spend an afternoon 7 days a week trying 7 different things to determine whether or not it's going to be a viable business or it's going to lead to a viable job that you want to do. Having a social network of like-minded people will lead you in the right direction. Do that early. That's what I would tell them. And it's traditional education may or may not be for you.
Yeah, I used to worry more about the AI taking the jobs, and I used to just go, is this one so much bigger? Right? I know throughout history the exact opposite thing has happened. Every time the technology comes, people are scared. They probably sometimes even rebel, and then when you look back, it grows the economy, it grows opportunity, it grows abundance, but AI, I thought, boy, this is so big. I think, could this be the exception? But the more I dig into it, the more confident I am that, yes, there's going to be a little more disruption at the beginning, but the impact is going to be greater than anything we've ever seen, especially when you start factoring in, what we're doing in space and with, robots, AI, 3D printing. You start mixing all of those things together, not to mention all the other stuff that'll come. And there really is, man, I'm jealous of these kids now. I mean, I was kind of worried about them, but now, in a weird way, I'm really jealous that there's never been a better time to go out because of the barrier to entry and all the opportunity.
They're going to be living in a much more abundant world. I mean, there's just no question about it. I mean, just the way businesses are being run now, the way they're being created, the difference between the way NASA created a rocket and the way SpaceX and Bezos's group are creating space travel, far more efficient now, faster to market, unbelievable breadth of jobs, from manufacturing to engineering. It's just it's tremendous, and every business is going to be like that. It's going to have to be like that.
Yeah, it's
Yeah, I'm with you. I was pessimistic at first. I said it was a scam at one point in my life, not too long ago. But now I have a lot of hope, and I don't believe it's false hope at all.
all right, listeners. Hopefully, your takeaway is this: you're as excited about the future as Anthony and I are, and if you're not, just dig in. I think the more you learn, the more okay you'll be, and just try it. Jump on the train. So we're going to go to break. When we come back, we will continue with the abundance briefing at the end of the podcast now instead of at the beginning.
Here are tales of abundance. We know that fitness is just as important as money or milestones. It's one of our key 5Fs for lots of us. Taking care of my body while I build my life is one of the more time-consuming and difficult goals to chase. That's why we're partnering with AG1. It's a daily drinkable habit. Less than a minute, that's formulated with 75 plus vitamins and nutrients and designed to support energy, digestion, and immune defense. It even has a few grams of protein that we're all chasing these days. And if you want to try it with our affiliate link, you'll also receive a free AG1 flavor sampler, plus vitamin D3 plus K2 with your welcome kit when you first subscribe, a $72 value. Go to shop.drinkag1.com/tales.
Listeners, welcome back. We are with our new format here with the abundance briefing toward the end. And we're going to start out, Anthony, talking about tokenization, rewriting finance. And you had mentioned you weren't real familiar with this. There's a lot of things underway. The New York Stock Exchange in particular is working on tokenizing security platforms. And here's why I think that's important. We live in a digital 24/7, 365 world. And the stock exchange is open less than a third of the day, 5 days a week, and closed on holidays, right? One of the appeals to Bitcoin and other things is they trade 24/7, 365. The market never closes. There's liquidity. That's one of the things. The other things I think are equally important is there have been numerous audits of these companies, or things have come up where there were more shares outstanding. I'm trying to think who the company is, but there was a company that they had a vote, and it turns out they had way more votes cast than there were shares in the company. And then they started looking at it, and it turns out they had issued more shares than what they said. Putting that on a blockchain or tokenizing it allows them to audit it.
Define tokenization. Just define that briefly, if you can.
Think of it. You could think of it as a Bitcoin. You could think of it as a different coin, right? That I would call a shit coin. You could call it, look, $1 in an account is a token, but it would be a digital representation of it, right? Really,
Okay.
Our banking system now, a lot of it is tokens. You have a token that represents $1. You don't actually hold a dollar bill. Well, the same thing. If you buy Apple stock, right, you don't get the bearer bonds. Like I'm guessing you own 0 bearer bonds. I'm guessing, unless you've got an angel
Correct.
investment, right?
Right.
I have a few for things that I've invested in that are not public yet. But if you go on to your broker, right? We'll pick on E-Trade. If you go to E-Trade and buy something, you don't actually take possession of the stock.
Right.
E-Trade doesn't actually take possession of the stock. That's a whole nother thing we could dig into. There's somebody else that holds all the stock, and they don't even have it. So you have a representation, a paper claim on that stock. But what the token would be something where you could actually take the bearer bonds, right? So the simple way where they probably start is they just open it up. They're talking about trading 24/7, 365, and you can move things. But ultimately where this goes, if you can get a token for Apple stock, you can sell it to somebody else, and you can probably just cut the broker at the New York Stock Exchange out of the way.
Right. Okay. Now I understand it. So if I want to sell my stock to you, I send it to you. I don't have to go through the broker, pay a broker, just transfer the token from Anthony to Randy, and it's over.
Yeah.
Yep, got it.
Right. But it's tokenizing, and I think they're creating a new stock exchange in Dallas, and there isn't a lot of talk, but it's Chase Bank and Goldman Sachs and BlackRock. I mean, it is big players that are building this thing. I mean, they are.
Yeah.
I will be shocked if they aren't fleeing New York and its high taxes for Dallas. But I think at some point they're going to go. But from what I hear, there's a good chance that thing is going to have tokens trade 24/7. And now you're also just automating it. But to me, the big thing is that it has to be an open, decentralized blockchain that somebody could audit, know they have whatever it is. And as weird as it sounds, when you get something digital, you can actually put it in a wallet and take possession of it, which you can do with a stock, but try. It's unbelievable. If you want your Apple shares, your bearer bonds, to actually have them, it's really, really hard to get them. It's super heavy lift. So anyway.
Just to clarify before we move on, the stock exchange, trading stocks is 1/3 of the day, but futures trading and options trading is available 24/7, 7 days a week. So that's the discussion that the rank and file of the universe are restricted to this sunlight trade, while the big companies, hedge funds, and so forth that trade a lot in options and futures, they have a ability to trade on stocks 24/7.
Yeah.
So next topic.
Okay. All right. The next topic is we are going to talk about breakthrough biology. It's just we're printing organs or creating organs, the drugs and the costs are collapsing. I've got an article here from MIT. I will show for those of you that are on YouTube and watching along with us. But the headline. This is from the MIT News, and it's injectable satellite livers could offer an alternative to liver transplantation. And we don't have to get deep into the science, because this is where I wish we had Dr. John. He probably would know more. But that is just one thing that's happening, right?
One of the most deadly diseases has one of the highest rates of mortality once you have liver disease. Getting a liver is next to impossible.
Yeah, there's over 10,000 people currently on a waiting list for liver transplants, right?
Yeah.
There's a real bottleneck there where people can't get in. So this really goes after, hopefully saving lives, right?
Yeah. I was listening to someone talk about the science behind moving from, early trials to human testing, and then human allowing it to be any kind of new technology and new medicine. And AI is allowing the elimination of primate testing, which, is really, not a great thing for the non-human primates, because they're used because they're the closest thing to a human being. So if they're able to eliminate the need for that and go from, testing on mice, or not even testing on an animal at all, to implementation, that's just a giant leap forward for mankind. And the speed of getting from point A to point final implementation can be shortened.
Yeah, that's
dramatically.
That's what everybody talks about with pharmaceuticals and new drugs, right? It's so I forget the cost, but it's over $1 billion, and little guys can't play, right? I mean,
right.
There aren't enough people trying and enough experiments and enough. It's really capitalism, entrepreneurship. Like, we need that in the medical field and science as well. People competing.
Well, Huberman talks about there's kind of an East Coast, West Coast capability for this, for this research, because the money flows from the government to these big facilities that have lots of resources, lots of physical space to do research and so forth. And the universities in the flyover states, they don't get this money because they don't have the research capability, but AI can bridge that gap now. So medicine, I think, in my opinion, is going to be one of the fastest breakthroughs that we're going to have, and it's only going to accelerate. And frankly, it's because there is money in it. There's money in it, and with it, follow the money. That's what law enforcement says: follow the money. And I think healthcare is going to be where that's at.
Yeah, I think it's interesting, the life expectancy, longevity being, we had a guest on talking about, living, a great life until you're 100 or older. It's really being attacked from two reasons. If we look at this, this MIT story, they're talking about there's 10,000 people waiting on a liver transplant. Here's a way that we can create livers, and that might happen with hearts or all these different things. That's one way of attacking it, but there's also doctors and AI. Heck, I mean, John, who's not with us, John talks about ending chronic disease, and there's lots of people working on this. So there's, one approach is the people that have this, let's get them what we need to fix them, whether it's a liver, a heart, or a kidney, whatever. But the other thing is to just avoid this altogether, right? And find preventative cures, and whether that's drugs. So it's pretty interesting. It'll be interesting. Does it get fixed from one way, the other way, or both simultaneously? Is how that shakes out. All right. Let's go to the other thing that I know jumped out to you is the experience economy is still winning. So tell us your thoughts.
Yeah, I love it. So I love to end the briefing on a really positive note. But things, it used to be he who has the most toys win in my generation. And that was true. I mean, boats, cars, Porsches, who had the best motorcycle in the driveway, the biggest pool, the biggest house, and all that. And it seems to me that thanks to a younger generation, more thoughtful generations like my son who's in his 40s and others, that they're more into experiences. He drove down to Cincinnati from Columbus this week with his kids on school vacation because the kids had never been to Cincinnati. They wanted to go to a ball game. They just, they took off and it was an experience. They had a nice time. They were able to do AI, let them do all the research, finding when the games were going to be there, what time of day, what's a suitable restaurant for kids, what hotel to stay at. And they created an experience. And this is going on everywhere. It's going on in, local entertainment, right? We have in Austin, we have Moon Tower Comedy Week, I think it's called, or 2 weeks, where literally hundreds of comedians come to town, and you could pick out the 3, 4, 5, 10, 20. You can get a pass for all of them if you want, and you can have an experience as opposed to going out and spending, $400 on, a new bike or something, So it's happening everywhere, and AI, I think, only accelerates it because, as we talked about earlier, information is free for all intents and purposes. And there's free in the sense of it doesn't cost anything, and free and almost free in the sense of the amount of time it takes to do research. So I just think it's exciting, and I use it all the time for the trips that we want to take. We're planning one now, and we'll see how that goes. But
easy. One of the things that jumped out to me in the prep and the notes on this is sports tourism is now 10% of global travel spending.
Wow.
That is amazing to me. 10% of global travel spending is sports tourism. I mean, that blew me away. And if you think about it, though, because of Zoom and because of technology, business travel has definitely dropped in the last years, decades, whatever. But because of that and just common technology. So, all right, anything you want to put a poll on this?
Well, It's funny you say that. I wonder what the impact on the conference business is going to be in the long run. That used to be the boondoggles of business. Vegas, we're going to go out to Vegas for such and such a conference. And, no one ever accomplished a darn thing out at a conference other than get a good dinner, see a show or two or whatever. But that's interesting. Yeah, I didn't think about that. Yeah, putting a bow on it, I think, again, using the technology to your advantage, and getting into it, spending the time with it, not thinking of it as a hot stovetop, will really be helpful for the non-technical of us. I'm anything but a technologist, but the more people play around with it and learn from it, it's the new Encyclopedia Britannica. None of you out there know what that is. Look it up. But yeah, I think it's a great thing. Abundance is awaiting you.
All right. Listeners, you know the drill. If you're still with us, you like us. So download, subscribe, give us a thumbs up, follow us. If you're on YouTube, we're trying to grow our YouTube audience. So if you're on YouTube, go and follow Tales of Abundance. You can also find us at talesofabundance.com or, different social media sites. Anthony, it's been a pleasure. Have a fantastic week. Listen and subscribe to the podcast wherever you get your podcasts. Click follow for more content like this, or go to talesofabundance.com to join our community and get free tools.